This movie would have gone down a lot differently if this game was in the main premise. Game Night was directed by John Francis Daley and Jonathan Goldstein. It stars Jason Bateman and Rachel McAdams as married couple Max and Annie, whose love of fun and competition permeates their everyday life. During the regular game night they host, things are shaken up when Max's successful brother Brooks rolls into town and offers to host a superior game night in his mansion. Ever competitive, the couple agree with the intention of winning whatever Brooks has planned. But before the night is over, consequences for Brooks' shady double life show up to crash the party, turning the stakes very real. Now, I love comedy movies. Over the years, a lot of them have stood the test of time for me and have actually become some of my favorite films to date. But unfortunately, when it comes to seeing them in the movie theaters, I have been burned many a time. Now, I'll admit it's hard to get too mad at a comedy movie because it's just supposed to be fun, right? But when the term fun becomes synonymous with we don't really have to try because who cares, it's just a comedy, then I have a problem. Game Night, I thought, had an interesting premise, though. Also, I think board games have been experiencing a kind of renaissance that's making them a little bit more popular. So I thought it was clever that they recognized that. As someone who's gone to many a game night and loves testing the bonds of friendship with an 8-hour session of Risk, I was curious to see what this movie had to offer. So what did I find? Was Game Night an exciting win or an agonizing crawl to defeat? Let's get right into story. Game Night opens with a match made in heaven for our two lead competitive spirits, Max and Annie. We follow a brief history of fun-loving romance and see how games, board games, arcade games, party games of all kind fuel this couple's happiness, and the regular game night they host for a tight-knit group of friends. When it's revealed that Max's more successful brother is arriving for a visit, we see the envy Max feels towards him is more than just the spirit of healthy competition. Which is bad news. Our happy couple is having a difficult time conceiving due to stress. When Brooks proposes his own superior take on game night, the couple intend to beat his elaborate mystery scavenger hunt. But their party is unexpectedly crashed by real criminals. Brooks is kidnapped, and the line between real and fake is shot. What follows is a high-stakes scavenger hunt by radically ill-equipped people who are unknowing heroes in an otherwise thrilling action film. This setup is freaking hilarious. The plot to this film was made pretty clear in trailers, and for the most part, that's exactly what I was expecting to get. A comedy about completely incompetent people reacting very inappropriately to their circumstances. And I would have been content with that. But the film very wisely moves past this, choosing not to milk every joke it can make with this, but saying just enough about it in order to move on to the further hilarity of them having a deal once they realize the truth. That's where we get a good second helping of comedy that keeps this film fresh and funny. The fact that these people are just a bunch of average Joes thrown into a crime narrative makes this actually a surprising critique of action movies, and a really creative way to do a parody film. Also helping the pace is the fact that our group is separated into 3 teams, and the plot follows how each pair is handling their own circumstances. We move from a story about a group of unaware friends, each pair with their own issues and personal dramas, to a story about a bunch of friends that just care about each other and have to work together as a team to make it to the end of the night. I also want to point out that not one of the events that happen in this film feel like they were there to lag the story and just fill time. This film has payoff after payoff, and it's both hilarious and keeps the momentum up. At its core, Game Night deals with the pros and cons of having a competitive spirit. Does it make life's risks into part of an exciting game, or into sneaky tricks designed to send you 5 squares back? If I had to make any complaint about the actual story, it's that there's this one subplot that keeps coming to the surface that I feel was not 100% needed. I feel that the main story was really in Max's relationship with his brother. And while the baby subplot added something to the personal stakes for these characters, overall the ideas around parenthood I felt were trying to express something that was already coming across. To be honest, I actually kind of forgot about it at times with everything that was happening in the movie, and then a character would bring it up and it'd be like, oh, I forgot. Overall, this film could have been a much simpler, passable comedy movie, but it had the ambition to layer in some messages and actually be a pretty fun action movie too. And for that, I have to commend it. Alright, moving right along into characters. Game Night has a lot of them, but the film does a good job of giving every character their place in the character dynamic. Don't laugh at me. And although there is a large supporting cast, oddly enough, no one ever really felt unneeded or sidelined. In watching this film, I was surprised how much these guys felt like an actual group of adult friends. People who have their own lives and are their own people, but who also have a history together and care enough to make time to enjoy each other's company. Taking time for each pair's own mini-narrative gives them a place to shine and helps everyone feel like actual characters and not just wacky things to cut away to fill time. It's a pet peeve of mine that a lot of the times in comedy movies, characters will say things that just are clearly desperate attempts to make something into a catchphrase. But nothing any of these guys said felt unearned or desperate. They simply react to the situations they're in, and the movie just trusts that that's going to be funny enough. And it is. There's a lot of times where you see the setup for something very familiar that would happen in an action movie. And since these characters aren't action heroes, they react in a very real way, and you think, yep, That's exactly how I would handle it. And it's hilarious. Max and Annie are also brilliant characters to follow as our leads. Jason Bateman is totally relatable as a man who's confident, well-adjusted, but with some deep-seated insecurities that are just waiting to bubble to the surface. Rachel McAdams is brilliant, and I would love to see her in more comedy. It was interesting to see her play an almost parody of her vibrant American dream girl, since it was at odds with the situation. The film also does a great job of showing the dynamic of their relationship too. This doesn't really spoil anything, but there's this part I adored where Max and Annie have to communicate to each other really discreetly, and they just start charading things to each other. And that's how they communicate. It's little creative touches like that that make this couple seem really charming and just a ton of fun to follow. Jesse Plemons as Max and Annie's unintentionally menacing neighbor is also just gold. If nothing else, see the movie for him. He's a scene stealer. If I had to make any complaints about the characters, it's probably wrapped up in the fact that with everything else that's happening in this film, the movie kind of has to remind itself to come back to the message at times. And mostly this comes out in a character, Jason Bateman's character, telling us what's going on during a quiet moment. To me, any discussion or dialogue around the baby stuff didn't really come up as organically as all the stuff that was going on with his relationship with Brooks, his brother. And it was the only part in the movie where it kind of felt like, okay, now we have to tell the audience how this relates back to the message. But in the end, it really didn't ruin anything for me. I did feel like the journey these characters took was earned, and even the supporting characters were just enough to be fleshed out, but not pull focus from the leads. The movie could have been a bunch of catchphrase spewing throwaway characters, but instead they actually delivered some dynamic that made the film good. It made it good. Alright, tone. Why is it that I never know how to segue into this tone one? I mentioned before how this movie turned out to be a really creative parody film. A lot of this was because of the really funny writing and the way characters would handle a situation or things they would point out or comment on. These things were kind of a cheeky way to point out some things we've seen in action movies pretty consistently and have come to accept, no matter how far-fetched they are if you really think about it. And cheeky is the best word I can use to describe the overall tone of this film. Given that these people are all good-natured, everyman characters typical of a comedy film and completely at odds for an action narrative, it really makes all the style and action movie choices stand out as a tool for comedy. It's like, imagine Phoebe Buffay holding up a divey bar a la Pulp Fiction, or the whole gang in a dynamic John Wick-style action chase scene. It's ridiculous, and it works. Speaking of dynamic, I have to give this film props for being way more innovative than it had any reason to be. There's some really creative transitions here. Lots of camera work that's both fun and fast-paced. I don't play a lot of video games myself, but I saw this movie with someone who does, and there's this one car chase scene where they tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Oh, they filmed this like a video game." Didn't have to do that, movie, but you did. Good job. There's also a lot of moments where it would establish a location by an aerial shot where everything was kind of in that miniature effect, so that everything looked like little game pieces. It's little details like that that kept this movie fun and cheeky despite paying a lot of homage to action movies and crime thrillers. I also just want to point out that I think it's been a trend in comedy movies for a while to lean on a cast's ability to improvise and just kind of keep the camera rolling and trusting that the audience is going to find the repetition funny. And I've absolutely seen this work. But I also think it's kind of created a sameness in comedy movies, at least for me, where it's just an over-reliance on long, awkward silences and rambling, awkward dialogue, and it's just awkward. And awkward can be funny, but there's a lot of awkward. But it was just really refreshing to go to the theater and see a comedy that was so focused on its own idea and had the balls to be action-packed and fun and even try to have a message. Creative, critical, cheeky, hilarious. So let's have a look at Game Night's score on the Screen Spectrum. I don't know, guys, I honestly feel like Game Night just delivered. It had a great idea and the guts to get a little bit creative and think outside the box with it. And for that, I think it deserves respect. I think I have respect for any comedy movie that trusts itself enough to be funny without relying on gimmicks like people getting smacked in the face, or weird slow-mo dance sequences with hip-hop music played over it, because I was surprised to find the Game Night to be exactly what it promised to be and then some. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this review, and as always, this has been Screen Spectrum. Thank you so much for watching. Logan, I think I did it all before the battery died. I was curious at what this film had. That makes it sound really lame. You eat your burrito and watch PewDiePie.